o'clock. I will call a meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to call on Kay. She wants to give a special announcement to us.
And it's not so important that it ranks a whole number in your packet, and I didn't want to add paper, but October is planning month in the United States. And so in order for planning and zoning to take place, I'd like to thank the staff that does planning and zoning. I'd like to thank the county board, the people that decide to do projects in our community, and especially you folks, the Planning Commission that works extremely hard, volunteers your time, and has to do analysis and make serious decisions. And so we do serious work here all the time, but you need to get some recognition for it once in a while, so this might be the month to do it. So thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, the next item is approval of the agenda. Does anyone wish to have anything added, deleted, changed?
Commissioner Jacob doesn't like that, Jim.
Oh, that's fine. I guess that isn't under the agenda, but we'll make it work.
Free, I'll have it next day.
You get good, Karen. I have a comment on the minutes.
No, this is the agenda.
Oh, the agenda, okay.
Was somebody make a motion or?
I would move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. All right, the next item is, anyone have anything to say about the minutes of the September 21st, 2017 meeting? Don?
Mine is very minor, but then you'll know that I read the minutes. At lines 297, 298, 299, there's an inconsistency.
What page?
Lines, page 9 of
298
the
and
packet.
299.
On line 297, it's T&E Farms, and on lines 298 and 299, it's T&A Farms. Now, is that an inconsistency, or am I missing something?
It's supposed to be T and E. It's supposed to,
In all instances, okay.
okay. So Ann told us what's supposed to be, so I take it she's got this down cold.
Okay.
Anything else? Again, I need a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes with the recommended changes.
Okay, second. Harley seconded. Chris moved. All those in favor of approval of the September 21st, 2017 minutes say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And that's with the correction. All right. Now where did my agenda go? New business. This is the docket that we tabled last month. And as you all know, I hope you didn't forget, we've got two solar garden petitions here, but we have to treat them both separately. So we got to go through the whole series of things for each one. So at this time, I guess I'll introduce docket 10-19-17-01. Lou?
Thank you, and good evening. As you know, last time we found that there was an added layer of zoning that we hadn't had on our notice, or what we're ready to discuss. So it's tabled. And in the meantime, we were able to get the notices out. So we're noticing 3 sections of the ordinance for each of these. For the first one here is the Fast Sun 18. So it is for the community solar garden, the 1 megawatt. It's over 1 acre in size. It's within 300 feet of the top of the bluff and within a slope range of 12 to 18%, which requires all 3 of those sections to be noticed. You have a memo in front of you that was kind of an addendum to the staff report that discusses and analyzes the MRB standards as they relate to the ordinance and this petition. And the findings of fact document also that has some additional language relating to the MRB. Most of the findings of fact and the entire staff analysis from the staff report last time are the same. But we did change in the memo. There's a change to, I believe it's condition number 3. And I think that has to do with the screening. So we added a small section of screening, which I'll show you as I go through the slides, what area that is. So does anybody have any questions about the noticing, what happened last time, the what's being proposed? I can answer that. We can talk about that now. Otherwise, we'll get into the actual petition and the presentation.
Don?
You alluded to a staff report in front of us. It's not loose. It's in the.
It's under the one that's
Yeah.
tabled in your book, Don.
So,
Oh,
there we
it's-
go, like
oh,
that,
it's back
like
here.
that, yeah.
Okay.
That's last month's thing. Your memo is under what section?
It would be on page 27
Under tabled?
of the packet,
New petitions.
and that's under the
New
new
petitions,
petitions
right, okay.
piece.
So see, here's the new memo, and then the rest of the stuff is from last month under table.
you.
I think that's,
So, if it's all right, I'll start the presentation and we'll go from there. See if the clicker works here. It didn't work for me earlier in the day. Is it middle button? There we go. Thank you. So the Fast Sun 18 project is the further west of the 2 projects we're considering tonight. It's 1 megawatt, approximately 5 acres. 6 acres is a little on the large side. I think it's more accurately 5 acres. 4,000 solar panels. We're adding 1 megawatt to approximately 8 megawatts of capacity on this section of the XL's line. So with the 2 that have already been added, what's before you tonight is 3 and 4 megawatts on that line. The total capacity on this section of would be, we're halfway there, just to give you an idea.
So it's really on a first come, first served basis then for the remaining 4 megawatts,
It would be, yeah.
unless somehow XL upgrades.
Right. I mean, XL has, in the future could upgrade at some point, but it's obviously out of our hands.
I wonder if the public's aware of that.
Which part?
That there's limited capacity there and it's first come, first served.
Right. I wouldn't have been. I don't know. I'm sure most of us wouldn't be.
I wouldn't have been.
But the project is not located on a bluff. You can see on this mapping exhibit, it's got 2-toned colors. The darker color is the mapped bluff. The lighter color green here is the 100-foot setback for structures. The Fast Sun 18 is really the only one that is up against that bluff. The Community Solar One, which will be the second petition tonight, is got quite a bit of a room between the actual bluff and the project area. It's kind of interesting because the Fast Sun site is the flatter of the two. It maxes out at about 14% slope, whereas the Community Solar One is a bit steeper in this area and is pushing right up against the 18% slope. But for the Fast Sun 18, that's before you now, it is close on both of these sides, and we will be staking it as part of the construction permit when the development certificate is applied for. We'll be going out and staking it and measuring on site just to make sure that it's staked out, and when they construct, they know exactly where that line is.
Why doesn't the 300-foot come to play here?
The 300 feet is it's a buffer, it's an overlay district from Highway 61, a 1 mile section. So that, when you're within that area, it just has additional criteria and standards and triggers for a conditional use permit. So if this didn't require, like if it was for a home that met all the standards otherwise, and you were within the MRB though, there's a requirement for a CUP. It also has a higher standard for the limits of what you're allowed to build on for slopes. So it's and it's more, there's a higher standard for triggering a conditional use permit within that area.
And the 300-foot doesn't apply here?
The 300 feet does apply.
You're not showing it on that map.
This is,
I think what we want
Oh.
there's setbacks and then there's overlay districts. If it's
okay, so,
meeting the setback, or if it's a certain percentage slope or higher, they would have needed a variance instead.
yeah, okay, so the 300-foot setback. The 300-foot setback is going to come, we don't have it on here, but it's, it's somewhere in this area. And all that is doing is, if it falls within that, a conditional use permit is required. So it doesn't need to meet an additional setback of 300 feet. It has to get a conditional use permit if it's within that 300 feet.
And we're covering that here.
The 100, right.
Right.
Right. The 100 feet is still the only setback.
We got 3 conditions to this conditional use permit. There's
Three notices or sections of the ordinance that
Yeah.
trigger the need for the conditional use permit. So here's the MRB. Here's Highway 61. That's 1 mile, and that's why our project is falling within that. Same with over here. Here's Highway 61. It's a 1 mile buffer out to here from Highway 61.
So in the first paragraph there on page 28, it says the mapping exhibits show the bluff areas with the 100-foot setback and a 300-foot. So, and then it says that you can clearly see the projects are at least partially located within the 300-foot from the top of the bluff. So is that map, it says that map is included, but I didn't see it. 300-foot setback?
Yeah, I think what we were showing was just that we don't have a 300-foot layer on here to show. But since this is 100 feet, 300 feet is going to catch both.
It'd be another 200 foot around the light green, right?
Right. Yeah. And so any projects that would fall within that additional 200 feet beyond the light green here would require a conditional use permit. And so that's why we needed to re-notice it to make sure that the notice was correct and was catching that fact.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just for clarification, you're saying that there are 3 different parts of the zoning ordinance that require a CUP, but that 300-foot range is one of them.
Yep.
But the 300-foot range is not a setback.
Correct.
Thank you.
I was just looking for it. It says the mapping exhibits show, so I was looking for the map and I didn't.
Yeah, I guess that line there was a little confusing now that I read it again. it does kind of sound like it, you would have the 300-foot, line on there showing it. And it's not. So. So the reason for the MRB when it was originally adopted and developed back in 2011 was to add additional standards and protections for visual quality, specifically along the Mississippi River corridor. So the 1 mile was arrived at in order to catch pretty much all of the bluff sides from Highway 61 out. Some of them, the bluff, the 61 varies in its distance from the bluff. So a mile was going to catch most of those and then fall within this area. The only area, though, that it goes kind of beyond that first bluff and catches another road that runs parallel is this Apple Blossom area. So this is the only area in the county along this corridor here that another road running parallel falls within the Mississippi River Bluff area. It's kind of fitting, though, being is that it's Apple Blossom Drive and it's a scenic byway. So the intent and what's in the ordinance and what it says is specifically for those views from the river valley. And if you look at the aspect, obviously we discussed this a little bit last time, is that you're not going to be able to see this from the river valley. But being as this is a scenic drive, and those are issues within that corridor. It does also apply to this. So what are we going to do about the visual aspect of it? In the condition number 3 in the staff report in the memo, it talks about visual screening. And these are the areas that we are proposing are added for screening of the existing or proposed solar arrays. The developer has stated that they are flexible about that. They have recommended and is in their proposal along the fence on this north side and along here a kind of hedge of dogwood, which is a shrub, which would be outside of the fence that will be around the solar array. We recommend these 3 areas for a mix of evergreen junipers and deciduous trees, something that will provide screening from the road out in this area, and this is just extending this tree line a little bit further to catch this. So obviously when you're talking about trees being planted, it takes time for that screening to fill in. But these are the gaps, and the video will show it too, that mainly it's this gap here is what you see across, and you'll be able to see this in the wintertime kind of through the trees once the leaves are off. But this area here was more of a pasture or grassed area that some screening would help cover that end of it a little bit. Also here, extending this kind of screening down will help with those views as you drive mainly from the south north, looking out this way. It'll help dampen that view of about 10 acres of solar panels out there. The other piece that is also helping this up in this area in the north, the landform is higher, so you can't actually see the project area from this direction. And then this last piece here is where there's the XL connection is, and there'll be, for each of the projects, there'll be 3 posts that where the line connects and then heads out to the XL line. So in order to soften that appearance, we've talked to the developer, and they've agreed to work with us to provide some screening there as well.
Lou, Arlie has a question, I believe.
What's in between those two, Lou?
That's already
Is there
trees that are
vegetation on
there.
there?
That's
Right there, yeah.
highway right away, right?
Yep, so this area, the right-of-way comes somewhere to here, in this area, so not all of this is in right-of-way. But, yeah, this is pretty good, like juniper trees,
There's some stuff there.
there's some, like 23-foot tall trees in that area and wild shrubs and stuff.
That's all I had. All right.
The same with, this area here. Both these areas have trees or patches of trees essentially that provide screening.
Eugene?
Yes, Chris.
So could you sort of, I was trying to look at the map that has the contour lines on it to try and figure out what's the high and what's the low ground, really getting at that point that you were talking about. So could you just go over that again? Like, what are the high points, what are the low points?
So the high points of the ridge is kind of like this. Kind of comes along here. And then this slopes down this way
To the south.
and gently slopes this way as well.
Okay.
This is the high.
So this carries up, there's actually a fairly decent sized embankment here from where the landform's up high, and then it kind of banks down to the road.
And so the contours over where the screening is, could you review that?
So here, this is sloping down into a ravine, and then it comes back up through here. Actually, it slopes all the way down to here. This is the bottom of the ravine here where the pond is. And then it's sloping back up to here. So from this area here, from this kind of blank area where there's no screening, where we're proposing it, you can see straight across a small ravine essentially. And you're looking at this face up to here. So this is all, this part here is all facing the road here essentially.
So without the screening, that would be visible, but
Yeah, this end especially, because this actually provides pretty good screening for all of this.
okay.
But this end here would be exposed, the panels will be exposed to that view.
Okay, and so that's what the screening corrects or addresses.
I mean, if somebody's traveling down Blossom Drive at 55 miles an hour, it's going to be it's currently a fairly small window that you're going to be able to see that. I mean, obviously, if you're walking or biking, you see it for longer, but still, there's over here, there's a number of homes, and most of those won't be able to see it either. They're either far enough back or they've got screening on their own property. There is one kind of right in here, I think right in here, that maybe from the second floor of from their house, they'll be able to see, they can see out across this.
And is that the individual that wrote the letter? There were two letters,
I'm not sure which house he lives in.
and I was curious to figure out, I was sort of thinking that the one was from the vineyard.
I think that's the Hellstad one. Yep, I think that they own the vineyard.
They own the vineyard, and so can they see it?
No, I mean, their home is out kind of back in the woods quite a ways, so no, they can't see it from their house.
The other letter, is it all right if I just ask questions, Eugene?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so the other letter, the address is a business address, and it's in downtown La Crosse. Does that gentleman actually own property out there?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and do we know what property and if it's visible?
No.
No?
All right. Donnie, did you have a question now too, or
No.
you got yours answered, or?
I'm fine.
All right. Go ahead, Lou.
Oh, no, I do have a question. Thank you. In the screen connection area, the structures proposed there are 3 power poles, or what were you saying?
Yeah, so in this area here, each of the projects has a connection up to the Excel line, and that consists of 3 essentially power poles.
Is,
And so each of them together, there'll be 6 poles, kind of.
What side of the trees are they?
They'd be on this side of the trees, on the property owner's property. And then the power lines along the right away.
I don't remember the drive that well. Is if you're on the drive, can you see Highway 61 anywhere?
Not in this side.
Not right there,
Not
no.
right there.
You can see it from the winery,
Yeah, if you go out to the winery, I mean, they've got a
but
beautiful.
that's over that edge of the cliff the other way.
But there's a couple sections as you're driving down, maybe maybe 3 sections as you're driving along Apple Blossom that offer nice views off to the river.
You can see the river, but I don't think you can see 61. I might be wrong.
You might be right, yeah, I don't know that you can see 61.
I don't think so.
So, I'll head to the next slide. It's the video. Before I do the video, the memo does include, one of the additional standards for the screening is that it's, that the structures adhere to a certain earth tone color palette. That was one that generated a little bit of discussion in our office, just talking about, well, how do you design differently for solar panels, and you don't really. But I did include a color palette just to give you an idea of the variation in color that can be included on a earth tone color palette. So it's quite a.
What page?
It's on page 30.
3 of
So I just wanted to illustrate
30.
that there are a very diverse amount of colors that are allowed and that are earth tone color. I don't think it'll be much of an issue in this
Blue
case.
is an earth tone?
Just because of the distance from the road to the panels, the color is going to be, you're not going to see the color itself. You're just going to see structure. So with that, if nobody has any additional questions, I will play the video. So this is from the gap in the screening, and so you can see the pond below and the slope going up. Can you pause? Can you start it over and pause it? Thanks, Ann. You can pause it there. So the solar array it'll kind of stick out on this side a little bit. You'll be able to see. Maybe like out to here, and then it'll be along this slope back into this the screening. So you won't see in the summertime. I mean, you might see a little bit of the tops back in here and through the trees, but there's pretty good screening softening the site in summer, anyways. Then I'm going to kind of pan around a 360 degree so you can see the existing screening along the road, Apple Blossom Road to the north, some of the properties on the other side.
You can't back up. Was that a tower in one of those shots?
We can go back and look if you'd like.
I think there's towers up there, yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple towers up in that corridor. I don't know. Would you like to go back and see? There's the petitioner's home, and the ravine back around to.
That's right. That's right where they'll be. Right where we just.
There's the pond. Yeah.
Right behind the pond.
Behind those trees.
Right there.
Yeah, so they will be. This won't be. This actually comes up, and then there's a kind of a draw where the trees are. They'll be behind the trees. There's a slope behind there.
And all that is 18% or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until you get further you get down in the ravine, the steeper it gets.
But where the panels will be sited,
Yeah.
there's none of it that exceeds 18%.
No, and we're going to go out, like I said earlier, and actually stake the part that's close so that they know exactly where that line is and they can stay behind it. And then we have another video down the road, just a little bit to the north. So this will be the connection area where those new poles go, is up in there. And this is the gap in the screening along that section. Can you pause it? You can see from this aspect the ridge is higher. So the panels this is the same tree line that was over here. And how this ridge that was in front of it, actually the landform blocks the whole project site. So from that area to the north, you're not going to see that part of the project.
Is that in corn right now?
It is in, There's, most of it's in, there's a corn and bean rotation, so, there's a
It's like
strip of
corn on the
corn.
lower.
Yep, and there's bean up on top.
That won't make much difference when you take 10 feet of corn crop off for view.
No, not from, from this section over here, it won't make much of a difference. And this one, the corn crop is below, and it's not gonna make a difference there, no. I think the distance away is, kind of, making that less. So here's this 360-degree view, from that,
There's that
normal
tower.
part. You can see from this part up here, there's some different homes. That's the one that's, possibly from the second story of their building, their home, they might be able to see out, as far as visual impacts go. Okay, that ends the video and my presentation. So with that, you can open the public hearing, and if you have questions for me, I'll be over here asking.
Okay. At this time, do we have any questions for anyone? Or do we have any comments from the petitioners themselves?
Yes, my name is Mark Zweig. I'm the agent for the petitioners. And I would like to add that we work closely with the tenant farmer to keep the solar array on what he considers the subprime ag acreage there. So we position both sites as far back from the road as possible to be sensitive to Apple Blossom Drive. So the site is a good fit with the distance involved. As much as we want to keep them close to the road to limit our cost, we do understand the sensitivity around Apple Blossom Drive. And I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions at this time? Oh, I suppose, did you state your name and address for the record? You did? Okay, all right. I forget pretty fast. All right. I guess I need a motion then, unless somebody has something else they want to say first.
Motion to open the public hearing?
Yeah.
So moved.
All right. Kelly moves that we open the public hearing for docket 10-19-1701.
And I second.
And it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The public hearing for docket 10-19-17-01 is now open. Anyone wishing to speak either for or against this project, please come forward, state your name and address, and say what you have to say. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak for or against this Planning Commission docket -01, please come forward and say what you have to say. For the final time then, anyone wishing to make public comment on docket PC 10-19-17-01, please come forward and speak your piece.
Move to close public hearing.
Steve has moved to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Chris seconds it. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of closing the public hearing for docket 10-19-17-01 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now closed. Do we go into the findings of fact now, Council, or?
You do, and just a reminder that
All right. Now, where are they located? Okay, so then they would be in the pile that was under my booklet. All right. Anyone? Anyone have any comments about any of the findings of fact?
I guess maybe I'd have
Steve?
one question. So on number 3, it says the structure on site will have an appearance that will not have an adverse effect upon adjacent residential properties. And in our packet on page 31, part of the criteria for the River Bluffs, Mississippi River Bluffs, is that exterior material shall be non-reflective.
I believe that has been addressed somewhere in here, right, Kate?
If we could have the petitioner's agent maybe address that?
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Eugene?
Yeah, just a minute,
I would
Chris.
say on page 161 of the packet is information about the solar panels. And they're Trina.
Well, my packet only goes up to 67 pages.
Oh, I'm talking about the tabled packet,
The what?
the tabled packet from last month,
That's where you're at, I guess.
where glare is addressed.
Is this what I want?
The panels that we're using actually have an anti-reflective coating on it. And so they're not like panels you see in a
Go
desert or anything like that.
One more
that
page.
actually reflect.
There you
We
go.
want to absorb as much as possible, so there actually is a coating on these solar panels to minimize the glare impact, as well as increase the production.
How are the panels framed?
Framed with aluminum, but it's brushed aluminum. It's not polished at all, so they do have aluminum frame.
How about the poles for the racking?
Poles are galvanized steel.
And they're
It's gray, gray.
gray? Like a
Zinc.
matte gray?
Yeah, matte gray.
Any other questions? I believe at this time, if I could find my place, whoops. Just saw it, no, it got buried. There's 2 additional comments from people. Chris mentioned that already. Did everybody see that? The amendment to the agenda that talks about, it's in our pamphlet on page 35 and 36. Does anyone have any comments about that?
I'll just comment that I liked getting the completely amended agenda with the changes in red, rather than just receiving the changes and trying to figure out where they fit in.
Okay.
It
Well,
was-
I didn't have nothing to do with that, so thanks whoever did it.
That was very clear to review. So.
Okay,
Gene,
Yeah,
Chairman,
Don.
when do we discuss recommendations of staff?
Well,
I suppose if you want to do it, I suppose we might as well do it right now.
yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I
Either you
think we
pick
should
out
do that
one,
before we do findings of fact,
but we're not going through each one unless you have a
Right.
specific one.
or the recommendations.
If you have.
Findings
No,
of
no,
fact. we're
finding,
not-
I'm talking about page
Memorandum?
128.
Yeah.
Ooh,
You should probably do that now, I would think, right?
And
So-
I'm in the tabled section, section 128,
So-
or page 128 of the table.
So you're not in this agenda packet, you're on last month?
Yeah, in the tabled.
Just clumsy.
Techie guy will get with us, yeah.
128? No,
128.
128.
Like Paul Thumbs with the sand.
Yeah. But that's not 128 pages. I'm sure of that.
Well, this is 141.
Oh, my God. Okay, you're right.
So is
So
there
right before that.
something specific you want
How about, let's begin with 3,
to, okay?
There you go.
which is the lands, the
Everybody know where he's at? Okay, go ahead, Don.
who reviews the screening plan to be sure that it's achieving what we hope to achieve after there's growth there?
I do.
And do we establish a timeline here of getting that screening done? For instance, I drive by the Dingfelder thing on 248 all the time, and it's been in operation, been constructed. There's no screening on it.
It says,
Within a year, this one says.
yes,
This one says within a year, Don.
of the start of the project.
Commence, yeah, called commence, yeah.
I
Finish.
guess Dingfelder's within the year. I don't know if they had that same 1 year.
Lou?
The conditions of the, that wasn't our first one, was it? We had a few other ones, but it's been kind of a process for as we go. We've been building on the last one and improving conditions. That was the first one that I think that we required screening for. But it was actually part of their submitted plans. I don't think that it was even a condition at that time. But they did submit plans, and they did state that they were going to, I think they stated to you all that they were going to do it. And we talked to them, a representative of Novell last week, just for a little update, and they're asking for comments from us, some guidance, which we're going to provide soon. And then they're working with a landscape architect or a landscaper of some sort to come up with a plan that they're going to submit back to us for review. And they still hope to, they told me that they still hope to plant trees this fall. So that's where we're at with the Novell one, but
Are we satisfied with 1 year? I mean, why couldn't they start now with the beginning of the project? Get something planted so it's growing.
When it comes to planting, you, especially, I'm not a landscape architect, but for coniferous trees, you have like, I think it's either in the spring or the fall, so you have, but it's our intention that, falls, it would be within a year. You try to plant right away in spring, depending on availability of species that need to be planted.
But if an arborist recommends planting in the fall,
Yep.
wouldn't you plant it this fall?
Well, they don't even have it.
Well, we don't even have a permit
Well, I
yet.
mean, presuming the construction's going to start this fall.
Well, I don't, is it? It isn't going to start this fall.
Construction's not going to start this fall.
Oh, okay,
too,
thank you.
so.
Okay. But even so, the year seems to be stretching it out from,
Well, I'm sure that it goes by fast from his standpoint. Kay, do you have an additional comment?
I just wanted to add that from the standpoint of the landscape construction, if we're digging, if we need a specific number of evergreen trees, the window for transplanting evergreens, if we have to dig bald and burlap, if they need those for their project, is basically August 10th through September 10th. Not now, it's too late. And then another window from about April 15th to May 1st. And if it's wet, or if they're still under construction, if we hold their feet to the fire for 6 months, to conclude it more quickly, we could be putting the plants in a situation of stress where they're going at exactly the wrong time of year too. So even though it's not ideal to maybe drag things out for 12 months, it's more from the standpoint of plant health and trying to get a more successful transplant situation going. So in that standpoint, I would recommend keeping it at 12 months, but that would be my reason for it.
So I would agree with everything Kay just said. Back to the Dingfelter's application, it's easier to get support on upcoming projects if the past ones are, fully maybe going up, not just to the T, but above and beyond. And I have gotten comments a number of times from constituents that why aren't those trees planted? And we've brought it up a few times too, back to at the planning commission level, so. And I think it was, I don't think it was, to my recollection, it wasn't just a point of discussion, but it was, I think it's a condition.
I look back, I didn't see actual condition on there, but I do
Because of-
remember.
We talked about it.
We talked about it several times.
Yeah, we talked about it. I remember them standing up and saying it'll be done. And then afterward, they've submitted a plan. They've submitted information.
They've represented that they do it. So.
Yeah.
Well, nevertheless, it is a condition on this one, so that's something we shouldn't need to worry about, right?
Okay, is there any other recommendations that you wish to discuss?
I'm going to hark back to my favorite here, number 9, the bond. And I'm going to express objection to the $30,000 after the first year of operation through the life of the project. That's impossible to do, but unless we're going to renew it on an annual basis, we should have that in there.
On the same,
Yeah.
Number 9.
okay.
And the county board should be concerned about this too, Commissioner.
Well, I haven't got any traction on anything stricter than what's been passed here.
So you would recommend adding some language to talk about the requirement for renewing it on an annual basis?
That would be more realistically fit what's available in the bond market.
Council?
The way that this condition is worded, it says that they shall host and maintain through the life of the project. That would suggest that they would need to renew it in order to maintain it throughout its lifespan.
In other jurisdictions, we do the renewals, and we generally do it once every like three years to keep it up with inflation. And so there's no issue with having a renewal, put in a condition, because we have to do it anyways, and generally the bonding company will be the tied to the insurance company giving us the liability insurance, and so that has to be renewed anyways. But we have been, as much as it's nice to just get a bond out there the first year, okay, we're done. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. So we have to renew it about every 3 years, at least with the company that we're working with now.
I think it should be tightened up some, that there's renewal language in the condition. Regardless of what other jurisdictions do, that doesn't carry any weight with me.
I just, Eugene.
Chris.
I just point out that the actual condition does say that they'll maintain it through the life of the project, which I think
Yeah,
was the counselor's point.
Yeah, it says through the life of the project, which is the,
Arlie?
I know I've got a bond with the company that I'm working with, and that's kind of their normal thing of 3 years. I've worked with a couple of them over the years, looking for different policies for that, but all of them I ever got a quote from were pretty much 3 years. Yeah, it's good for 3 years, so. And usually, and I'm sure you probably know, if for some reason they cancel, they will let the bondholder, which would be us, know that it was canceled or they lost it or whatever you want to call it. But that's just their kind of way of doing it for 3 years in a row. I don't know if there's any way of asking them to do it yearly, if we'd be gaining anything.
I'm going to throw this out, you can all reject it. After bond, insert renewed at least triennially, or whatever would be appropriate for triennial terms.
Triennially. What's triennially?
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
Every 3 years, okay, that's what I thought.
Triannually. yeah.
Triannually, yeah.
I had to look that one up.
Or whatever council would suggest. I move that. And it, from what we hear, it only codifies what we're hearing, and then it's expressed in the condition. Should have no negative effect from what we're hearing.
No.
Do I hear a second to this addition?
Yeah.
All right, Arlie seconds it. Council, do you have any comments at this time?
Just that I might suggest, rather than inserting it after the $30,000 bond, something along the lines of, the applicants shall post a $30,000 bond commencing after the first year of operation, renew it on a 3-year cycle, and through the life of the project to cover the decommissioning costs.
Thank you.
What is it?
At least 3 year, I guess.
Yeah, I had at least 3
Yeah.
years.
I don't know, Stephanie said that.
So, okay, now,
who
does
actually
everybody
takes care of
understand
it?
our motion and everything, or are we still,
So, just so I understand, what's it at presently? Under the way it's written, it's annually?
No.
No, it's just,
The
it's,
way it is written right now is that the applicants shall post and maintain a $30,000 bond commencing after the first year of operation and through the life of the project. What's being proposed is that we change that to post a $30,000 bond after the first year of operation, renew it every 3 years, and maintain it through the life of the project.
So who takes care of that? I mean, if it fails, who's gonna keep track of that?
If the
It's
motion-
kept up triannually.
Don.
Don? I mean, who's gonna keep track of that for all these solar farms?
I don't know how the planning and PL and ES department tickles themselves on all of this stuff that has timelines, but should be appropriately a tickler calendar maintained.
And there should be somebody in some department that takes care of it.
Well, wouldn't
Eric?
the bond
Volunteer?
holder get notified if it wasn't being?
Well, I would think, but.
Not necessarily. You do it, you do
Who's
it.
gonna notify?
Well, there'd be, yeah,
I mean, it's gonna have to be directed one direction to somebody, somewhere.
It really shouldn't be any additional burden on the Department of PL and EZ to do that, to have that on the books and to have it looked at if it needs to be.
I guess I can mention with some of the sand and gravel, some of the bituminous temporary plant sites, it's always, we maintain it in our database. It used to be the hard files, but now with the database, we have the ability to log and track those. And if there's any questions, sometimes we do get, have correspondence back and forth to make sure that the bond is valid for the operations, should there be any concerns. And I guess that's what I would state, is that if there was a concern, that would be a signal to us to try to verify that the bond is still valid for the activities.
and usually the bond would include an address and, be Winona County at this address. Notice would come via the mail, and we get stuff for, some of our other bonds that we have that usually come here.
okay,
So-
at this,
A little more discussion. And, I don't want to go back and rehash discussions we've had at other applications because we've gone through most of it, but,
We're developing.
so my concern always was this bond really becomes a pay-as-you-go. And if you want to walk away from the deal or it becomes non-profitable or, I don't know, for whatever reason you'd want to get out of it, you're not really, there's not any skin in the game. This at least makes it so you can only, you at least have 2 years ahead, right? If it's a 3-year bond, you're only going to be able to renege on the contract a third as many times. And so I'm wondering whether 5 years is better than 3 years, without making them go and provide decommissioning for the full 25 years at once.
I don't follow that. But why is, if the market is 3 years, what we're hearing tonight, and
Because they're extending themselves for 5 years of protection of decommissioning instead of 3 years at a time.
I see your point.
It gives them less opportunities to walk away from the deal.
I don't think that's available in the market. That's why I chose 3 years.
I wouldn't know.
And, you know, we talk about this all the time, and
Yep.
and I thought somebody would have done some research. We always rely upon individuals giving testimony.
I think you asked council once, and they said they would, but not until it was before the board again, right? Before this commission? Did you
There
make?
was some research done into bonding. There was no specific question asked about anything in particular. So there, I believe that Kate provided some general information several meetings ago.
Mr. Chair, just point of clarification, are you trying to modify his motion then? Is
I
that,
was suggesting that maybe a 5-year would be better than 3 years. Yeah.
so, is that a motion to,
Is that an amendment, you mean?
that's what I mean.
An amendment to my amendment.
Yeah.
If it's not available, it's not.
Okay. I don't believe that we've heard anywhere in the discussion that it is available, so is that satisfactory to you, Steve, or?
Yeah, I'd support the motion of,
All right.
because it is 3 years.
All right. Does anyone else have any more questions or concerns on the amendment brought up by Donnie? I guess at this time, council, could you read it for us again?
It would be, the applicants shall post a $30,000 bond commencing after the first year of operation, renewed every 3 years, and maintained through the life of the project. And then the remainder of the paragraph from there.
Now, does everybody understand what the amendment is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Amendment's carried.
Thank you. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I will also draw attention to the $30,000 amount, and I'll leave it at that. I don't think it's sufficient, but I'll leave it at that. And I just heard that I have to raise specific questions on the bond issue, so I will. Could we find out what's available in the market for these solar project bonds, and what the life of a bond taken today? Do you understand my question?
I believe so.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the recommendations?
Yeah, one other question. So on page 31, number 8, it talks about the view shed analysis. Was the view shed analysis conducted then?
Yeah, there was a walkover view shed analysis with me and another staff member out on site, and trying to address where those view sheds are and which ones are maybe need to be pointed out at least. So it was it wasn't like a scientific view shed analysis. We didn't do a GIS analysis of view shed, but we did do walking the property, the old one person standing on one portion of the property with a waving at the other one, and seeing if where those views are, and all the way around from the road. So yeah, I think we did a pretty good job of identifying where those view sheds were and where the impact would be.
So for me, that's entirely sufficient for this. But where my concern lies is that, can we make record of that and apply it equally to any other applications that would come forward, whether it's a house that somebody doesn't want to see, that they're not required to have some GIS super expensive computerized layout, they get the same one guy standing there with his hand and the other guy looking for it.
I think that's where we're at as far as the technology that we have at our disposal at this point.
Do we have some way to, I just want everyone to be treated fair.
Right, in the same way and consistently. I don't know, does anybody have any other thoughts on that? I mean, as far as I can tell, that would be our process at this point.
Well, I mean, we're doing, field technical verifications of existing species where species can be added and what kind of species would be appropriate so that they thrive and produce what needs to happen. We, in this particular analysis, took into account existing commercial ventures, the houses that are the closest by, what bottomland trees might be appropriate to extend into the ravine draw, what matching junipers, so that it looks naturalistic along apple blossom drive and blending with the existing pollinators and junipers. So it wasn't a non-technical review. I have 25 years of experience in that specific area, so I feel comfortable in saying that I could go to court in another county and they would actually believe I'm an expert in it. So in that respect, we don't need GIS for that because a lot of that is field work. And so since I'm the one doing a review of the landscape plan, I wanted to make sure that the areas that are going to be the most cost effective for this business person, but also the most able to preserve the view shed for a variety of folks. Tourists, those that drive the road, those that use the commercial venture vineyard nearby, as well as existing property owners who keep their area.
So I think we'll be using the hand and the...
And I'm good, and it wasn't an accusation on that it wasn't done right. It's just that at one time, it seemed like a view shed analysis was quite an onerous procedure. And it could be quite involved. It could involve a lot of technology and a lot of expenses, and would have to be done with and without vegetation. And if that's being pushed aside for this method, I'm good with all that. Just apply this. I just want the same standards applied across the board.
Yeah, the GIS that we had been doing back when the ordinance was adopted is we don't really have the capacity to do it at this point. It takes a lot to do that, and I don't think anybody has the expertise or knows how to do it at this point on staff. So that's where we're at.
Kind of tagging on that. I think you all know that I'm opposed to this whole MRB overlay because it imposes additional restrictions on property rights that don't apply to other property owners across the county. It's discriminatory. But this connection area, there are restrictions on height. I expect that none of the poles in the connection area will exceed 35 feet in height, and I think that needs to be monitored. And I'm not sure that those poles won't be seen from the river. So here again, we're kind of setting a precedent of allowing something to be seen from the river in the MRB.
Yeah, I don't think it will be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, have we got any other discussion on the findings of fact? Well, no, we're still working on recommendations, aren't we? All right. Is that complete now? So can we go back and do the findings of fact?
Oh, point of curiosity.
Oh, brother. Okay.
Number 10 here. Why don't we require a statement from XL to be submitted with the application so that we don't go through this only to find out after we spend all this time that there will be no connection?
I think this was addressed before. Go ahead.
For actually one of the Fast Sound project, we did receive the interconnection agreement. package back from Excel, and it's favorable to proceed with the project. So it does take some time, and the application, you just got to wait, months to get that back from Excel, but we did receive one of them back. We expect the next one back by December, so it does look good.
I would hope that staff looks for similar letters in the future on these projects before we spend all this time at them.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Anderson, I've been told from some of the other counties who have been working with this, as I've been doing some background work, which is in process, that the rankings for the projects with Xcel Energy, if they're approved by, if the conditional use permits are already obtained, that the point structure can be higher, which is why it usually comes here first and then goes to Excel. And I don't know if the petitioner would like to address that, but that was some information I received from one of the phone calls I registered.
A lot of it's just driven by the cost also of when you do apply for Excel, they require deposit money for each one of these. It's fairly substantial, and so it's sort of like the chicken or the egg, if you want to say that, where you got to know if you can get your site permitted. Because if all of a sudden you get the interconnection agreement back and you haven't started the conditional use process, then you're like, okay, now we got to go over that hurdle. So it is a challenge to figure out. We start out the conditional use process right away because there's a lot of variability in that.
It's good to hear that you have at least some preliminary.
Yeah, we do preliminary engineering. We try to get as much.
I mean, from Excel, you have some a letter of preliminary acceptance or potential, and hopefully that's in place before these come to us.
Chris.
Chair, we've discussed this particular topic before, and I've been thinking about it. The petitioner is a resident of the county. The petitioner pays the fees for the conditional use permit. They deserve the service. And I bet that there are conditional use permits that we've permitted for construction in a feedlot that maybe for some reason didn't move forward afterwards. But we don't say, until you know you're going to do it, don't come here and apply for a conditional use permit. And I don't really see how this situation is any different.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, now where are we at? Are we done with discussing the recommendations now? Okay, I hope that that's a good sign. So now we have to approve the findings of fact, right? Or
Yes, you either approve or revise and approve.
yeah. So anyone wish to start the discussion?
I think I'm in agreement with the majority of them. The one that I think maybe would merit a little bit of discussion or justifying would be taking ag land out of production for non-agricultural purposes, just so we've got some kind of record that why we supported it or did what we did. So I think that would be number 6.
The petitioner did mention that the person doing the project was trying to make certain that the least productive land, agriculturally productive land, will be used in this. Is that correct?
Yes, we worked really closely. There's quite a variance between what production on top of the bluff area compared to the side slope. he has to do quite a bit of lime treatment, and, you know, he was, I think, kind of pleased that he's not farming that piece anymore. A lot of erosion also, so we did work very closely to figure out where we wanted to keep the productive land available for agriculture.
We didn't have a prime soils problem here, did we?
No, it's not prime, it's not, it's all non-prime, isn't it?
There are some type 3 soils up on top that this project will be within, but there is not a standard that the county has to keep this type of development off of those soils.
The 40%?
No, but it's only for dwellings. The way that it's written in our ordinance, that is only for new dwellings. That's the way it was presented and adopted back when it was brought up in 2011, I guess, when that was adopted. So that only has to do with new dwellings that are proposed.
Would this make the 40% anyhow, or would?
I'd have to do the math.
Of the site?
I'd have to do the math, but it might. I mean, just thinking back to the map.
It doesn't seem like.
I don't think I had a map included in.
It doesn't seem like a very prime.
It's not. Yeah, so there's no. So if you look at these maps, I believe the prime soils are somewhere. If you look at this line here, it's a line in the field. I think they are up north of this, and then kind of go like this. So for this project, for sure, I'm guessing that would probably be less than 40%. This is just going by memory of those maps when I was looking at them, because they are up on the top here, and so when you get on the slopes down here, they peter out into type 4s and 5s. So yeah, they very well may be less than 40%.
Another point of reasoning, I guess, that I would support justifying taking it out of cropland to put into solar panel production is that as a farmer, I could grow corn on that land, sell it to the ethanol company to make fuel, which is energy, which is hardly any different than putting solar panels on it and making energy directly from the solar panel.
So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, is that what you're saying?
It's essentially the same thing.
Can we hope that in the future staff will incorporate soils information into this that they bring to us so that we can be aware of that?
If you would like to see a soils map with the type 1, 2s, and 3s on there as informational, we can do that.
And can we expect that we need to review the ordinance to address this lack of, I mean, we can't do buildings there, but we can do solar panels there?
That's something that you can consider when we're looking at the ordinance. There are some specific differences between dwellings and those types of development than solar development specifically. But it is something that is included in the model ordinance. There's it's an option for adding into the ordinance, and I think that can be a discussion topic for.
How do we get that listed as a discussion topic then?
Well, once we prepare that topic for your review, then that would be one of the topics that we would discuss. Once the solar ordinance comes before you to consider, that would be one of the aspects that we'd look at.
And refresh my memory, what's the timeline on reconsidering the solar ordinance?
Well, it's on our current list,
We'll talk about that in the old business this evening.
I think we're going to be talking about that later.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the findings of fact?
As to Commissioner Jacobs' point, I think that you're recommending some. I think we have to accept what's here.
I'm not making any motions.
Yeah, okay.
So
You're
there
making
is-
a point, not a motion.
Well, It should be part of our discussion record that that's part of the reasoning behind taking the property out of agricultural production and putting it into, that,
Including some prime soils.
yeah.
Do I hear anything about accepting or denying these findings of fact?
I would move that we accept the findings of fact as presented, along with the conditions.
I would second that.
Does that
Okay.
also come with an approval of the conditional use permit? With the conditions? My suggestion if you're intending to approve everything would be to adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Okay.
And approve the conditional use permit with the recommended conditions.
As
amended.
revised.
As amended.
As amended.
Right, okay,
No, that's agreeable, Sherry?
that's perfect.
Okay.
I second that.
Sherry made the motion and Kelly seconded it. Is there any further discussion? We've had plenty of it. Let's vote. All those in favor of recommending the first docket 10-19-17-01 as Stephanie has outlined, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It has been passed or recommended to the county board. Let's not waste any time and get into docket number 2. Let's hope this doesn't take quite as long.
So the notice is the same. I think we're pretty familiar with the site. This is the Community Solar One project. It's just to the east of the Fast Sun project, which was right here. The main difference with this project is that it's closer to the road and neighboring property owners. It's 1,000 feet away and 750 feet away, respectively. It's roughly 400 feet closer, just by the size of the project in the project area. The MRB is still in effect. Screening is the same. Essentially, the screening is acting the same way for both projects, and this one actually, this project needs the screening a little bit more, being that it's closer and it does protrude a little bit past over here. So that's really what this is for. We have videos. They're the same videos as we saw before. Would anybody like to view those videos? Okay. Thank you. Do you have any questions on that petition?
We already asked.
Probably.
The connection area is the same area for both.
Yeah, they'll actually be parallel. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think the one project will be along, they're parallel to the road, and then the other project will be directly behind it, parallel to that end of the road.
Both the same length along the same portion of road.
So you have 2, 2, 2.
Okay. Unless anybody has any questions for Mark, I hope we don't have to go through that. Would somebody be willing to make a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Kelly moved and Chris seconded a motion to open the public hearing for docket number 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Public hearing is now open for Planning Commission docket 10-19-17-02. Anyone wishing to speak either for or against this project, please step forward and state your name and address and tell us what you got to say. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak for or against this docket number 2, step forward and say your piece. for the third time. Anyone wishing to speak on docket number 10-19-17-02, please step forward and say what you have to say.
Move to close public hearing.
Steve moves to close the public hearing.
I second.
Vince moves to second it, or seconds the motion, I'm sorry. All those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing on docket number 2, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. The public hearing is now closed. Any more discussion on this subject?
I'd like to move that we accept the findings of fact as presented by staff. We accept the conditions with the same amendment as on the last one and recommend approval to the board.
Okay, Kelly moves that.
Sounds good.
Oh, Don?
Oh, there was a second, right? Or we
No,
just?
not yet.
Yes, there was.
Oh, Arlie, you seconded it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
I think for the record, we should raise the same points about concerns about the ag land and prime soils.
And we
And,
could reference the previous discussion that the same concerns apply, and that would then.
okay, very good.
Okay, does that satisfy everybody? Okay. It's been moved that we accept the findings of fact, the recommendations as amended, and what's the word I want?
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval of docket number 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, Mark. You maybe not have to get another motel room. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll have to join you
He's
then.
been here before.
See, we're driving the economy.
Yeah, we sure are. Okay, let's see. Then we need, where's my agenda here? So now we move on to docket number 10-19-17-03. Staff, who's got this one?
This conditional use permit involves a proposed new parcel less than 40 acres. In this case, it's 7.7 acres. The proposed 7.7 acres is illustrated by a couple of diagrams showing the nature of the land. There's a portion that is tillable, but the majority of the parcel consists of old pasture and woodland. In, I believe, August, the applicants did receive variances from the Winona County Board of Adjustment, mainly due to feedlot setbacks. One was to account for the father's feedlot, that was to the northeast, as well as the neighboring feedlot in this distance. This is a smaller feedlot. The setback would be 500 feet, and this was a larger feedlot in which required 1,000 foot. Those two distances were acknowledged. I believe the smaller feedlot, there was a distance of approximately 170 feet, and the larger neighboring feedlot contained a setback of 650 feet.
Eric?
Chris?
In the seventh item in the finding of facts, granting the variance does restrict feedlot expansions. It's both Or is it just one of the feedlots that's restricted?
They both would be to some degree, but as the Board of Adjustment really looked at the findings at that point in time, the most limiting factors were already acknowledged that we have a dwelling. In fact, Brian's dwelling is almost right on top of the property line already. So they can go in any direction except, this would be the most limiting factor already. But if they were to expand, they could, in a natural progression of expanding, they could go in any opposite direction. Same goes for the Martin feedlot as well.
Thank you.
So where's their driveway going in?
Pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chris,
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Arlie, go ahead.
Where's their driveway planned on going in there?
Easement.
The driveway would, let me go back to the one map. They intend to essentially come down through the field in this location here.
I thought they were going to have an easement on their parents' driveway or something.
They would have to have an easement because the green boundary that you see would be the property line. So there would be essentially a 33-foot easement drawn up to cover the access that they would have to create to get to it.
Thank you. I just misread it.
And why it's somewhat in that shape was an attempt to just take as little tillable land with this creation of this parcel as possible. But it is recognizing the fact that they do have to have a hard pack of rock to driveway to access that at that point.
Thank you.
You can see there is, it is in hay or alfalfa production. This is standing, just looking out to the south from the site of where the new house would be. And this would be looking back to the northeast at the existing father's place, the barns, and in that direction. Soils map shows the calculation done with the 7.7 acres. The shading of green represents about 3 acres. So if staff working with the petitioners looking at this particular configuration would get you about 39%, thus meeting that prime soil standard. So this is trying to encompass most of the tougher woodland to the south to occupy the new dwelling site. And we'll have a quick video. I'm standing at this site about where the house would be. This would be somewhat of the closest corner. Again, the variance was granted to allow the footprint of this structure about 170 feet to the Martin barn and enclosure. It's roughly 650 feet to a neighboring feedlot yet on the other side of that.
That was a smaller feedlot that we just saw.
Yeah, that was a smaller feedlot.
On that feedlot thing, so neither of those feedlot operators objected to this proposal?
Correct. They did not object to it.
And when are they made expressly aware that there's this kind of consideration?
Yes, they were. And the petitioner can add on to that question as well.
Is that feedlot active or is it just registered?
It was a dairy, but now it's in beef. They run beef cattle.
On the smaller one?
No, on the larger one.
On the smaller one, is it active?
The smaller one, there's just a handful of animals.
Okay. And this went to the Board of Adjustment?
Yes,
Okay. And they granted the variances needed?
they did. And it was twofold because there was 2 feedlots of different size and scale. One was to allow less than the required 500, and the second one was to allow less than 1,000-foot setback. And this is kind of looking now back towards the east. I think that's pretty good. That's good, Ann. You can shut that off.
So those feedlots can expand in an opposing direction
Correct.
without,
Without the need for them getting a variance.
But requiring a CUP, likely.
Not unless they were over 300
Yeah,
animal
if they were
units.
over.
I believe the, I can maybe get the numbers here. It's probably in the staff report too, as far as the feedlot registration on the one.
My point is, we put this language on the deed or whatever about not objecting to farming operations. But in a case like this, where the neighbors are further restricted, well, further restricted, is that accurate? May have to come for a CUP to expand their feedlot. I would think it'd be appropriate that be part of an expression on the deed too, that this new developer would not be able to raise objection to expansion of the feedlot.
We do have the standard language that we have typically placed on this. It's not on this proposed conditional use permit, but when the variance was granted, there was the language that you mentioned, and as a condition of that approval, that the following statement was recorded as a matter of that variance, that the owners, residences, and other users of the property in the zoning district or neighboring properties may be subjected to inconvenience or discomfort arising from normal and accepted agricultural practices and operation, including but not limited to noise, odors, dust, operation of machinery, any kind of aircraft, storage and disposal of manure, or the application of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. Owners, residences, and users of this property or neighboring property shall be prepared to accept such inconveniences or discomfort and possibly injury from normal operations, and are hereby put on official notice that the state right to farm law, Minnesota Statute 561.19, may bar them from obtaining a legal judgment against such normal operations. So that has already been done.
It would seem appropriate to me anyhow that in this instance there be additional language in that to block objection to expansion of the feedlot. Because normal operation may mean existing operation. It might not apply to an expansion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Kelly.
Can you describe the notification that all neighbors received? They received notification for the Board of Adjustment hearing and for this hearing?
Yes, there would have been several rounds. Actually, 3 rounds in this case because of, I think, the error in the notification of the first go-around, the variance. We had to postpone that meeting for, I think, a couple of weeks after, so another notice went out, so they got double notified. And then when the conditional use permit was applied for, there would have been a 3rd round.
So all the neighbors have received 3 notifications that
Yes.
this is going on? Okay.
Yep.
Could
Donnie, Arlie's been waiting patiently here.
I just got a question. They're going to have an easement going out on a smaller feedlot, correct? What if he wants to, how do they do that if that feedlot wants to expand that direction?
Again, I just want to point out that the most limiting factor is the dwelling owned on this property. This is a property line, and the feedlot for this neighbor is right here. So there's already a distance of probably less than 100 feet between a neighboring dwelling and a feedlot in that direction.
You're talking about the smaller feedlot, right?
I'm talking about the smaller feedlot. If he has an easement going to Nagle Ridge Road, what if that smaller farm decides to expand? He's only got two directions to go.
Right, we went with that measurement. I took it from the corner of the existing open lot. So in this case, the open lot, the diagram probably doesn't show it real good. I'd have to zoom in, but it was from the corner post of the open lot. So it's basically recognizing this whole area as the compound of that feedlot. So you could
technically make improvements anywhere within that feedlot compound and still be consistent with that variance that was granted.
Help me out here. Would it not be appropriate that our condition for this CUP included language that would prohibit some objection of the petitioner to raising objection to expansion of the feedlot in the future?
I wouldn't think so.
That would be appropriate for the Board of Adjustment, which has already been done, and that's not what we're charged with.
Yeah, there could be so many aspects of a feedlot application that wouldn't be necessarily relevant to the previous Board of Adjustment actions too, so.
We're really just being asked to approve building on less than 40 acres.
That's correct.
Anything else?
I'll turn it over.
All right, thank you, Eric. At this time, does the petitioner wish to speak on your behalf, or?
Brian Martin, Brett's dad. I guess I don't really have anything for or against. If you guys have any questions for me, what you were just talking about with the feedlot. I mean, we have 8 cows. We're not really a feedlot. We just have 8 small beef cows. My neighbors that you were talking about are actually kind of in retirement mode. In 10 years, they'll probably be out of business. You know, so it's not an expansion issue. It's kind of going the other way issue with our ridge as far as farming. So, and Brett's just looking to build a house on the farm. So.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, I need a motion for
Public hearing?
public hearing.
I also move.
Chris
Second.
moved and Kelly seconds. All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing for docket number 3 is now open. So I get to go through this spiel again. All those wishing to speak either for or against docket number 10-19-17-03, please step forward, state your name and address, and what you have to say. For the second time, all those wishing to speak to docket number 3, please step forward and say what you have to say. For the third and final time, all those wishing to speak either for or against docket number 10-19-17-03, please step forward and say what you have to say. I need another motion.
Move to close the public hearing.
Steve moves to close the public hearing. Arlie seconds it. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of closing the public hearing for docket number 3, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is now closed. Reconvene the meeting. Let's see. We need to discuss the recommendations.
I guess where's the well and the sewer?
What's that?
Who do I ask that? Where's the well and the sewer going?
Oh, okay, Eric, is that part of the discussion so far? Or this?
Recommended conditions, should you approve that, is that they are required to obtain a septic permit, which would be the design, identify 2 possible locations for a treatment area, and I believe, to my understanding, they would be sharing the well.
Donnie.
On packet page 44, section 9, I believe I'm going to vote for the petition, acceptance of the petition, but we should recognize that staff analysis includes the project would not be determined as an acceptable long-range land use plan in accordance with the comp plan. And also in the final composite map, which I always speak against this use of this because we never use it. It's always put in here, but we never use it. And that's it on 9. Is there anything we need to discuss there? I mean, it's not use, it's not, it's determined it's not acceptable. How does that play into acceptance or denial of the petition?
Unlike the Board of Adjustment, you don't have to find that all criteria are met. However, I would suggest that if you are voting to approve something without all the criteria being met, that there be something on the record indicating why you still think it should be approved despite not all criteria being met. So
Okay.
if there's other factors that weigh more heavily, acknowledge that those are more weighted than the ones that you're choosing to let go.
Well, then I'll make the statement that I recognize it as a nice infill project in the county, using an area for a residence that has limited agricultural potential and doesn't require access to the county road other than an easement. No, what's the term I want there? No
Approach
frontage requirement. So on that basis, even though it's not determined as acceptable in the long-range land use plan, I don't find that objectionable.
Okay, is there any other discussion on any other of the recommendations?
And we're also going against the recommendation of the final composite map, but we do that all the time. So.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we accept the findings of fact as.
One more point.
I'm sorry, I'm making a motion.
I'll bring it up later.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the findings of fact and the conditions as presented by staff, and that we recommend for approval by the board.
Okay, Kelly has moved, Vince has seconded. Now, any discussion?
Well, I think as recommended by council, we need to make this statement that I just made, that we don't find it objectionable, that it does not fit is not an acceptable long-range land use.
Mr. Chair?
Just let's let council answer.
I was also going to say that there are actually, I believe, 4 of the criteria that are not consistent, so I think you need to address more than just the one that you've addressed. So make sure that it's clear about why you should approve it, even though those are not met.
Well, on that point, I have something highlighted here about on section 10, that the last phrase of that, it is helping to create a pattern if approved. And that's 2 points. You mentioned 4. What are the other 2?
The
6
other
and
ones
7.
that are not, yep, 6 and 7 are also not consistent with the criteria.
Okay.
So 6 indicates that the requirement is that the land not have been tilled, and it has been tilled. However, I think we've heard in our presentation that they're minimizing the use of the best land, and that it's only 39% prime soil, so it fits the other criteria in terms of not being prime soils, prime ag.
So how do you want these addressed by us?
However you would like to, as long as you're in agreement that the benefits of approving a project outweigh the fact that not all the criteria are met.
Our comments are going into the record, so as you know, because they are, we are fulfilling the requirement she's mentioning.
And I think with respect to number 7, substantially restricting the expansion of adjacent agricultural activities, I mean, I think there's been discussion on that point, so I think we have that covered.
And that's specifically what the variances were for.
Exactly. And I thought your point was pertinent, that we're talking about the 40 acres, not the expansion of the feedlot.
Okay, now, Kelly, did you have additional comments, or you wanted to comment on something that's been commented on now?
I had no additional comments.
All right, all right. I don't want to miss somebody if they want to say something.
So we have sufficient record. Okay,
As long as there's reasons on the record, that's all I ask.
okay.
Okay? Is there any other discussion on the motion that we have on the floor? And if you need it reread, I'll let somebody else read it.
I move that we approve it with the findings.
Oh, it's already
she
been
did.
done.
Kelly already moved, yeah. And who seconded?
Vince.
Vince
Not been
seconded.
seconded yet.
Yeah. So, no further discussion? All those in favor of the docket number 3, the findings of facts, the recommendations, conditions, and, what am I trying?
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval to the county commissioners, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. The next stop will be at the county commissioners. Good luck. All right, next one is docket number 4, right? Oh, old business. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting beside myself. I keep forgetting that the solar panels were 2. All right, Stephanie, I guess it's your turn.
Petitions, don't you?
Huh?
Another 4-hour meeting, you just want to keep going with petitions?
Oh, no.
Sure. I bet we could find one if you wanted it.
I have no doubt.
Okay, so we're back talking about our zoning ordinance modifications. You should have in your packet the most recent draft. All the things that we've talked about before are no longer highlighted. The only things highlighted for you are the most recent changes that were made as you requested. So just to bring your attention to those, we have on page 58 the insertion of the word 60-day rule relating to the amendment timeframe. Then on page,
That's on page 60 on the amended.
oh, okay, page 60.
Oh, goodness.
I saved the other one. Then I believe on page 61 would be the addition of and environmental services director, or just to clean up that and make it consistent.
62.
What tab is it on?
New business and in old business. I'm sorry.
They didn't put it under old business.
No. Where is it?
I believe it's under the current packet.
New petitions. New petitions, page 59.
On the agenda, it's listed as old business. It's in with the new stuff.
Page 59.
I'm looking at the packet, but.
But this, it was amended after that.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you
right.
don't have the
59.
amendment.
Thank you.
So I need to add 2 page numbers when I'm doing math in my head.
We got it.
Okay. So the first 2 items were just cleanup of certain things, along with the third item, which is on page 64, again adding the environment and environmental services to the planning director. I think the big one that we had discussed before was regarding the imminent threat or danger to public health under enforcement procedures. The suggestion that we have to kind of clear up how those kinds of issues can be handled is to remove that language from paragraph 1 and have it read, in the event the county finds a violation or threatened violation of this ordinance, enforcement action will be taken through the following procedure, and then go through the procedures. And then add a paragraph 2, which indicates that violations involving an imminent threat or danger to public health or the environment shall be addressed in any manner allowed by law and are not subject to the enforcement procedures above. That gives us the ability to act immediately and do what needs to be done depending on what's happening. And then that's all of the ones that we had talked about at our last one. So with that, our suggestion from the staff perspective is to bring these out for public hearing. address those. And while those are working their way through that process, we will be working on the rest of the zoning ordinance amendments. So the solar amendment, which I know Kay has started working on, putting together the work group and trying to address all of those concerns. We're going to be working on a zoning ordinance amendment involving interim use permits rather than conditional use permits, which is essentially a conditional use permit with a sunset clause. And some of the other ones that were identified in the spreadsheet that we had before. So we're about halfway done with the ones that we've talked about, but this way we can at least get these ones moving forward and then finish the rest hopefully early next year. Questions or discussion on the ordinance amendments that we have proposed?
So what you're saying, up until that point, you're ready to go to a public hearing on?
Up in all of this, if you are okay with the changes that we have just made and brought forward to you, we will take this as proposed and start a public hearing on what you've got in front of you.
Up to, but not including conditional use permit
Nope.
revocation?
That will be in there as well.
That
Yeah,
is-
everything
okay.
that we have proposed that we've discussed would then go to a public hearing. It's all the stuff on the spreadsheet, I believe, that we talked about at our last meeting. The ones that we haven't started working on, the revisions we haven't done, I think about half of those items are not in front of you right now. And those we'll continue working on and bring those to you at a later date.
So the only ones that would go to hearing are what's in front of us here?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this was months ago, we talked about this. And I remember discussion about why are we doing this with exploratory boring? It's language that's in statute. Why are we bulking up our ordinance with what's in statute?
Somebody want to address that? I don't remember who worked on that.
And further, does any of this language overreach statute that I'm not aware of?
I believe what it does is make it consistent with statute.
Then why do we need it?
Because right now, we got language that contradicts state statute.
The reason that it originally was adopted, I think, was back in the 80s, and there was a bunch of model ordinance going around the state because of mineral rights was an issue statewide, and they didn't know exactly what kind of minerals were in different areas as much as they do now, and so uranium and oil, gas was mainly why, from what I understand, was the concern. Of course, we don't have any of those resources here in this area of the state, but model ordinance essentially went around and best practice was to be adopted in that ordinance.
So this would be verbatim with statute 103, is that L or I? Or?
Aye.
Yeah, and that would have been, the existing ordinance would have been based on that statute back in the mid-80s.
Nothing goes beyond statute here.
And that's some of the changes that are coming on the next round as well, are things to clean up what we have to make it consistent with statute, not to exceed it. There were some changes in laws.
So, Stephanie, you
Chris?
don't need a vote, you really just need our consent.
We need your
Consensus among the members.
And the question then is, do you want to do this? I don't know if there's expectation of petitions coming for the November meeting. We have 2 petitions thus far for the November meeting. So do you want to hold a public hearing in conjunction with hearing petitions, or do you want to schedule a separate hearing to do nothing but hear from the public regarding these, potentially discuss them and or make a recommendation to the county board?
Don?
I can't see where the public will have much.
That's what I was thinking.
I would agree.
That's what I was gonna say, is I can't imagine this would take very long. We open public hearing.
Unless we have solar panel ones.
Yeah. Do we have solar panels on the agenda? Lots or dog kennels?
We're getting that
Dog
developed.
kennels, yeah, dog kennels.
Okay, is it the consensus of the commission that we have it in conjunction with our regular zoning, planning and zoning meeting?
The only thing I would request, just out of respect to petitioners, that we put them first on the agenda.
Yes, I believe that this should be definitely after the docket. I want to double check one thing in our current zoning ordinance, though.
So
So my suggestion to this body actually would be to make a motion and to officially initiate an amendment to the zoning ordinance as recommended by staff, because at some point we have to have an official initiation, which then triggers our 60-day timeframes.
Does that have to be put in paper and advertised? and all
Yes.
that?
Yep. Yeah, if we're having a public hearing on it, it will be noticed and advertised, but we need something officially directing that a public hearing be held on the amendment to the zoning ordinance.
So move.
All right, Don has moved. Arlie seconds it. Is there any further discussion? Steve?
Okay, so one question, I'm sure we've discussed it somewhere along the way. Under exploratory boring, one of those, it doesn't say sand, but one of those is sand? Kaolin clay, or I gotta believe that that's,
Kaolin clay is bentonite, that's not sand.
That
doesn't say non-metallic minerals in there.
Looking at the
Definition of exploratory boring.
I believe that,
Isn't the intent to,
aggregate materials like gravel and sand are specifically exempt from that definition.
But the way our ordinance is now would tend to lead the reader that something different is required. That conditional use permitting is required to do sand and aggregate borings, which.
What?
If you look at that current section 9.11, that's the contradiction, is that it would tend to support the notion that conditional use permitting is still required anytime anybody does a sand boring or a limestone or aggregate boring, which since that ordinance was adopted, state statute has changed to exempt those activities from certain requirements.
Most of the state respects our sand and gravel resources.
seems, yeah, that, I guess I would have thought the intent was sand would be part of it, wouldn't you think?
Yeah. They're saying the opposite. I think Eric just said the opposite.
The way I understand what Eric said, this clears it up that sand and gravel borings are not covered by the need for an exploratory boring permit.
Do you have the statute on that, Eric, with regard to sand and borings? That's something that is likely to come up.
Yeah, we should have that.
We're concerned about
Support document when it comes out.
Yeah, so why would that be exempt?
I think there are some requirements for sand exploratory boring. I don't recall what they are.
Yes, Ross Dunsmore is probably the staff person that has done.
I thought, I mean, I'm trying to defend you.
Could we drop the side conversation, please?
Be the best language to occupy that section on this issue. He's had, I think, the knowledge with wells and borings and geological resources, and I think that this is what staff has reviewed as being, I think, the most consistent to capture the state requirements.
I guess I'd like to put off calling for a public hearing until we have a chance to look very closely at what statute says, et cetera, specifically on sand. I think there will be keen interest in that.
We could remove that exploratory boring definition section and withhold that to our next round if you'd prefer.
That's what I would prefer.
Did we miss something in the discussions? Isn't that why exploratory boring came before us, was to include exploring for sand?
It came before you because there was a change in statute and we were trying to have this definition reflect what the state statute said. So it sounds like state statute exempted those and is addressing them separately. And that's not what this is designed to deal with. This is separate.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with sand boring, or exploring for sand?
No.
But that seemed like that's what the public outcry was.
There's a public outcry about that, and that is addressed in a different area. This definition is designed to just match state statute. They took sand out and are addressing it somewhere else. This has nothing to do with sand.
Okay, does our, we may need another person here, but does our ordinance make reference to exploratory boring in the sand mining section.
I don't believe so. No.
There is nothing in our mining ordinance with regard to exploratory boring for silica sand?
What we're talking about here is having to get a conditional use permit to take and do exploratory,
All
right?
of this is just the definition of the word exploratory boring. It's not allowing it, disallowing it, requiring permits, anything like that. It's just defining what it means. And to make it consistent with state statute. There may be something else that we can define separately from this, but that's all that this is just a definition.
Do you want to add requirements for silica sand exploratory borings? That's a conversation you have over here. This is a different column, a different subject. It's not dealing with that.
I gotcha.
It's a policy discussion that you can have as a group or a county board can have if you want to, add, those types of, different types of restrictions. I don't know what those would be for boring specific.
Well, I understand what you're saying. My point is that changing a definition, by doing that, you're changing anywhere that word that is being defined is referenced. So if this is I guess before we change the definition, we need to know everywhere it's referenced.
Let me see if I can answer that.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything regarding. I don't think there's anything regarding exploratory borings for silica sand anywhere else in the ordinance, because the only place that we have anything specifically for silica sand is in the piece of ordinance that was just adopted last year, essentially not allowing mining in the county. So the other ordinance, it doesn't specifically state silica sand. It has to do with.
Section 9.11 deals with exploratory borings generally, but there's no reference to exploratory borings in the silica sand amendment that was recently taken care of.
Okay, so I guess my preference, and I'll throw this out there for you folks, is to set this aside for now so that we can study it before we put it to a public hearing, and go ahead and go with a public hearing for the rest of it. And I guess I'm asking for an amendment.
I think, yeah.
Don, are you raising your hand just to exercise, or?
I don't know. Did she make a motion to amend?
Yes.
Okay.
Then I'll speak against the amendment.
Well, wait, we gotta get a second first.
I-
Or did you second it?
She's shaking her head here. So.
I didn't second it.
Oh, you didn't?
Okay, all right.
It's not that I wouldn't, I just didn't.
Okay, well, does anyone want to second it?
I'll second it.
All right, Sharice seconds it. All right, so we have a motion to amend the public hearing to the effect of what? That we take out the paragraph about exploratory boring?
Sure. Yeah.
Just that part.
Just that part.
Go to public hearing with everything else, but take the time to study exploratory boring.
All right, now, Don, you have the floor.
I'm going to speak against it. I think it's proper to put our definition equal to state statute, and we can discuss it after that. For now, it's appropriate. We could leave this out entirely, which was my whole thing to begin with. If our ordinance already referenced statute, why do we need to bulk up our ordinance with this section? But as far as any discussion about changing the definition of state statute,
We can't change state statute.
We can't change state statute.
no, but I mean, changing to accommodate our comp plan, okay, and putting something in ordinance. That can come later after we put this definition on the books.
My preference would be that all commissioners feel okay with moving forward with what our recommendation is. So just for that reason, it doesn't seem to me that the risk is substantial based on the conversation I'm listening to from staff. But I'd like all commissioners to feel comfortable. So.
I guess I'm going to make a comment here. We have discussed this, changing the ordinance through this public hearing process for what, 8 months now? Something like that. And so far, we haven't accomplished diddly squat. How about we take our chances and actually try and move forward here? I guess that's my personal opinion. We can play that we're lawyers forever, and basically, unless we do something, we're not getting anywhere.
That's the purpose of a hearing.
Right.
But I think that Kelly is suggesting that we do move ahead, except for these 6 lines right here.
Yeah, but if we, this is my opinion, but if we, every time somebody disagrees with 6 lines, we take it out, we haven't accomplished anything. Because unless you have a discussion on the things you don't agree about, you never get anywhere. And I don't know how you can have a discussion unless you hold a public hearing and do it. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here every meeting from now on and wasting another hour, and we're just spinning our wheels.
But we can't go to the public and ask them essentially to approve the work we're doing unless we're all on the same page with what we're bringing to them. And it sounds like Kelly for sure is not on.
I'm not with that one part, and here's why. And maybe there was one meeting I think I missed, so maybe I missed when we discussed exploratory boring, or maybe my memory is failing me, but I don't recall us discussing that. So, I'd like to feel comfortable with it before we go to a public hearing, but we can go to a public hearing if you want and, have the discussion right there. I will be comfortable with it by the time we get to the public hearing. So, I'll go either way with it. We can be sure that we're all on board and we all agree with what we're doing here, or we can, have the public hearing and have additional discussion at that time. Either way.
I think what made me ask the question was I thought exploratory boring came before us because of some public outcry that people were exploring for sand. And
I would imagine it did.
So I was surprised looking at this definition. I thought one of them words must be sand, and I didn't get it.
Yeah.
But it's not, so somehow I thought I was missing something.
I think it was a section that there's been some confusion about from the public, and what our understanding was and what the public is read into it about. So we wanted to try to clarify what that is.
Boring for silica sand specifically covered anywhere else in the ordinance? Could it be covered here?
I would suggest not in this definition, only because then it would no longer be consistent with state statute.
But we can be more strict than state.
If you are going to do that, I would suggest having a separate definition that is a different term that's used through where you want it to. Exploratory borings has a section in the ordinance all to itself. It's different from the sand ordinance that we recently passed. So I think that the reason we're defining exploratory borings is because it applies to certain things and certain standards that need to be met. That's the 9.11.
I guess my issue with this is that we absolutely want to be consistent with state statute. There's no question about that, okay? We also want to protect our water. So any kind of boring, we should be concerned about, okay? So if it's not one of these things, then it's got to be covered somewhere else. And I'm not getting a level of confidence that if a construction sand miner bores into our water table, that it's sufficiently, that we're sufficiently regulating to protect our water.
I think that, like Eric said earlier, that Ross Dunsmore, who is, he handles the Minnesota Department of Health's drinking water well program, is also, he's well versed in borings, and that's where the drinking water borings are, it's all kind of meshed together. So he has a lot more insight into those aspects. Maybe we could have Ross come speak or talk about borings in general, to give some background.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I don't feel at this point that I sufficiently understand this to go to a public hearing. If you guys want to go, we can go. I will understand it by then.
Well, and it seems like, that when you look at this list, gold, silver, titanium, nickel, these are all petroleum, diamonds, gemstones. These are all valuable substances. And I'm guessing when this list was created, they didn't put dirt or sand on there because they didn't think they would be valuable.
Maybe.
But
They're more common and used for, they didn't have silica sand in mind either. They were talking about, resources that are used for gravel, construction, everyday stuff. They didn't want to have that pertain to.
Sharif.
I would agree that I think we should set this one part aside until we've answered some of these questions. I think if there's anything in here that will draw the public out, it would be exploratory boring, because I know there was some boring done in the county. I believe it was not permitted.
then it will be a long meeting. That will be a long meeting.
It will be a very long meeting.
It has happened. And it wasn't permitted. No one knows how deep or how many, or if any of those borings were filled in. This is what I've been told anyway. And so I think this would bring people out with concerns. And so I think we all need just to be very clear about this. So, unless we want that meeting to be really long after our other petitions.
So we've got a motion and a second and an amendment and a second to the amendment. Where are we at?
Well, we've been discussing, as you obviously understand. Is there any more discussion on the motion as amended?
It's on the motion to amend. The amendment hasn't been voted on yet.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Kay.
I have a question of council. If there is any advantage to preventing any prejudicial activities for any lawsuits that the county is currently engaged in, that tabling it until such time as any lawsuits could be settled?
Might not be a bad idea. So table it until, at least at this point, table it and bring it back to you.
I don't get that. I don't get the logic. I'm sorry.
That the county is currently in the middle of lawsuits relating to sand. It might make sense to not trigger more.
We could be taking a position on one side of the issue or the other, essentially.
No,
Essentially, what we're saying is, if you want to take this one out for now, that's perfectly fine, and it'll come back to you. It might not be the next meeting, but it will come back to you. We just might take a look and see if there's anything that would have an impact on the current pending litigation.
Kelly, they are speaking for tabling.
Okay, I'd like to understand why. What I interpreted her to say was that we were going to put it off until after the lawsuit.
Not necessarily, just long enough to make sure that there's not going to be anything, and we will bring it back to you, and hopefully the lawsuits will be shorter order. The judge has under advisement the motions for summary judgment, so hopefully we'll be getting a decision on those.
Just leave it out until that's cleared up.
And we all understand it.
I think we're all moving more that direction.
Okay, so,
Vote on the amendment?
yeah. Okay, who's got the amendment that we're voting on? Because I'm completely lost by now.
That was a motion by Kelly to amend the recommendation, or the language to remove the exploratory borings definition that was seconded by Cherie.
Okay, so, you all heard the amendment. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, the amendment passes. Now we'll vote on the motion as amended. Stephanie, can you repeat the motion?
Motion by Dawn to initiate the proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance and set it for a public hearing on November 16th, I believe is the date of the next planning commission meeting.
Okay, does everyone understand this motion as amended?
And that was seconded.
And
Arlie seconded it?
Yes.
I believe so, yes. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to have all this stuff and a public hearing on November 16th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. All right, now, let's see, what's the next item on the agenda here? Okay, Board of Adjustment, Cherie?
Excuse me. The Board of Adjustment met this afternoon and considered two petitions. One, excuse me. One was a variance for a lot width not meeting the 100-foot in a rural residential zoning district. That petition was denied. The second was a variance to allow a building site establishing Class 2 soil type instead, and that one was approved.
Okay. And let's see, then the next is, Steve, your county board update.
So the petitions that we recommended approval for last month, Leon Miller Cemetery, the county board approved. Christy and Amanda Mast for the farm dwelling, that was approved. Siebenhaler approved. Rank for the small business, that was approved, and the Heritage Hills area expansion was approved. So everything that we recommended for approval was approved through the county board.
Okay. Is there anything else that should become in front of this body?
I have a question of Cherie. As a planning commission member, I have interest in what the Board of Adjustment does. What was denied?
There was,
Do you know about this, Steve?
a landowner wanted to divide a piece of property. This is in Richmond Township, and didn't have the appropriate road frontage. And his petition did not meet the criteria. And in Board of Adjustment, we need to meet all of the criteria, the 8 criteria, in order to approve. And it didn't meet 3 of them. This followed staff analysis, and there was quite a lot of discussion. We weren't all in agreement about that. So, is that what you wanted
Which
to know?
township?
Richmond.
Richmond Township.
And the criteria that were in dispute were road frontage, and what were the other 2?
The ones that staff and the board did not feel that the petitioner met were practical difficulties, special conditions or circumstances unique to the property, or economic considerations.
There's a package from the Board of Adjustment if you'd like a copy.
Okay.
Have a look at it. It's got staff analysis, staff reports.
What was the road frontage issue?
The reason for the variance was he's at the end of the petitioner was at the end of a dead-end road. And so they only had total 195 feet of road frontage measured around the circumference of the dead end. You need 100 feet of road frontage for each, and so he was retaining 110 feet for himself, his own property, which left 85 feet of road frontage available for the proposed parcel. There's a minimum lot width in the rural residential zoning district of 100 feet. And they did not meet that, so a variance was required.
Because they're not in the ag district. So.
Yeah, it's a residential zoning district. It's a platted area of the subdivision, essentially. That was it was platted in '93 or '4.
So it had been in that ARC district, then the road frontage wouldn't have applied.
It seemed like the site was problematic as well. If in the future someone wanted to build on it, then it would require more permits because of slope and drainage issues.
Okay, is there anything else? Arlene makes the motion to adjourn. Kelly seconds it. All those in favor of adjourning the planning commission meeting, say aye.
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 Okay, those opposed say nay. It's unanimously adjourned.